The Arbery case, well, the sentence has already been delivered this past Friday. So our subject today is the Ahmaud Arbery case. Here comes the judge. And we're going to talk about what most significantly tipped that jury. This and a whole lot more on today's Charlie Crimebuster. What some people are calling, well, they're calling it the fastest minutes in true crime podcasting. Well, hello, and welcome to the second Charlie Crimebuster episode in this new year. Now, this past Friday, the judge in the Arbery case, well, he passed down the sentences to the three men convicted in the murder of Ahmaud Arbery. This was a young black man that was jogging in the neighborhood under a cloud of, quote, alleged suspicion, by some anyhow. We're going to focus on this case in a moment, but first I want to thank you. Thank you so very much for being a part of the Charlie Crimebuster podcast. And a very special welcome to our new listeners today. Hey, your positive comments and support, well, it's not overlooked. Please, if you haven't, take time to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform if you've not done so. And if you happen to be new to podcasting, somebody just kind of turned you on to this site and you're listening to this podcast for the first time, well, if you don't know a lot about listening to a podcast, well, feel free to email me, and we're going to send you a guide on how to listen to a podcast. You can reach me at charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Now, this week also, we're going to give you an opportunity to take a quick peek at a new project that we've been planning for this year. We're going to give you a week chance to look at the preliminary website for our project. This is before we launch it. Feel free to take a peek at it and give us your thoughts. If you'd like to do that, then just go to peacemakernetwork.com. That's peacemakernetwork.com. You see, our mission on Charlie Crimebuster, well, it's to educate the public and encourage the police. You see, that is why our true crime stories, investigations, well, we always try to give you a lesson to keep you and your family safe. You see, we do indeed try to, quote, educate the public. Now, we do also seek to encourage the police to let you know what these brave men and women are facing every day in their life. And before we get into our focus story on the Arbery case, I'd like to take the time to share with you a recent story, a true life story, that I think will solidify the reason for our new project this year. It was just on December the 29th, just a week or so ago, that two officers responded to a, quote, routine call. Now, if you've listened to this podcast, you know that I know there's no such thing as a routine call in police work. Well, this was up in Illinois. You see, some people had called and complained about dogs who were barking in a car that was near at a motel. It was actually parked there at the motel. And according to the Kansas City Star, well, the police, they soon determined that the vehicle belonged to a lady by the name of Harris, and they were directed to her room by the hotel staffers. Well, the Star reported that the officers knocked and identified themselves as police officers. They were telling Harris to open the door. And after about 14 minutes trying to get her to open the door, well, she finally came out, but then she tried to stop Sergeant Remanick and Officer Bailey from entering that room, because in that room was another man by the name of Sullivan, who had several warrants out for his arrest. Now, as the officers asked Harris to move out of the way, well, Sullivan allegedly appeared with a 9mm pistol, and that was loaded with a high-capacity drum magazine. He then, that is, Sullivan, shot Bailey in the head before opening fire on Remanick, striking her once before she escaped and ran down the hall to call for backup. Harris then chased the officer. He engaged her in a struggle. And according to the Star's report, prosecutors say that Sullivan's pistol had jammed. He tried to clear it with one hand, at the same time attempting to try to take Romanic's service pistol away from her. Then Harris, she came, and both Sullivan and Harris, well, they were able to take Sergeant Romanic's gun from her. Sergeant Romanic then pleaded with Sullivan and Harris not to kill her. She was pleading with them to, quote, just leave. Quote, you don't have to do this. Please just go. Please don't. Please don't. She was desperately pleading for her life. But despite her pleas, Sullivan shot Romanic twice in the neck with her own gun. She died. He and Harris then reportedly fled the scene. They went on the run. That was until investigators closed in on the suspects later in the week, arrested the pair at the home in North Manchester, Indiana. Now authorities have charged this pair, who shot these officers in cold blood, with first-degree murder of a police officer and attempted murder or first-degree murder of a police officer. Her partner, he did not die, fortunately, is in critical condition in the hospital. And the two perpetrators, well, they're being held without bond. And even though the state is not a death penalty state, well, my friend, they're asking for the prosecutor to seek the death penalty anyway. And I hope they get it. By the way, Sergeant Romanic, she was Officer of the Year in the year 2020. You see, my friend, this is the kind of dangerous job these brave men and women sign up for. And yet, today, there is a culture war against police. And that culture war, well, it's emboldened more and more people to kill these brave men and women of law enforcement. Just as I told you last week, police ambushes, they're up over 100% from last year. So, the Peacemaker Network, well, it's a platform. It's a platform where our men and women of law enforcement, along with other first responders, and of course our military, that's these brave heroes. It's a place where these brave heroes can get much needed help from the pressure they face and their families face day by day, protecting our own safety. So let me encourage you. Go to peacemakernetwork.com. That's peacemakernetwork.com for a sneak peek at what we're going to be launching in just a few weeks. Hey, do me a favor. Let me know what you think about it. And also, if you have any suggestions, we would love to hear from you. You can reach me, Charlie Crimebuster, at gmail.com. Charlie Crimebuster at gmail.com. Now, our focus today is the Arbery case and the judge who's already sentenced the three men held responsible by the jury for the deaths of Ahmaud Arbery, the young black man who took a jog in their neighborhood. First, let's take just a moment to acquaint you with the victim of this crime. Here are the facts about Ahmaud Arbery. Ahmaud Arbery was born May the 8th, 1994. He was nicknamed Maud Arquez. He was a 25-year-old lifelong resident of Brunswick, Georgia. He did graduate from Brunswick High School in 2012. There, he was a football star. And as a linebacker, he was known for his speed and agility. Now, among his teachers and friends, well, he was also known for a sense of humor and a big heart. He did frequently run for exercise, and many reported that regularly he had jogged in the neighborhood of Satilla Shores. He also attended the South Georgia Technical College. That was during the fall of 2012 and spring of 2013. He was training there as a career as an electrician. He did have an interest in that. He had paused his studies and he was trying to save money by working in his father's car wash and landscaping business. And according to family and friends, Arbery had plans to re-enroll in school. Now, to be transparent, he did have in his past some run-ins with the law. He was charged with shoplifting. He also had a weapons charge, because on December the 9th, 2013, he had attempted to enter a high school basketball game with a .380 caliber semi-automatic handgun. That was when Arbery was 19 years of age. But those troubled days, well, they at least appeared to be behind him. That was when he entered the Satilla Shores neighborhood on that fateful day. He seemed to enjoy stopping by to look at the work that was being done on a house that was being built there in the neighborhood. Perhaps it was his interest in being an electrician that motivated him to view the work at the house. That's what some have said. In fact, he had been viewed on camera 4 or 5 times entering and looking about the house. There were others, though, that thought that maybe he was casing out the place. But was he really doing that? Or was he just a black man in a mostly white neighborhood? Because you see, friend, there were many others who stopped by that house to view the work as well. And yet, to the three men that were charged of Arbery's murder, well, his past life, and the fact that he was a black man, well, it led them, I guess, to think that he was up to no good, and it led them to chasing him down with guns on that fateful day. But the fact is, my friend, there was no evidence, none, zilch, that this young man was really into stealing anything from that neighborhood. No evidence at all. And the jury agreed that Ahmaud Arbery was a victim at the hands of three men who sought to apprehend him on that day. Next, we'd like to take a look at the men who were held responsible that day. But now it's time for us to recognize, as we do weekly, our courageous citizen of the week. Now, our courageous citizen of this week is a guy by the name of Christopher DePauli. He's from Irvington, New York. And while Christopher was driving his daughters to a softball game there in Irvington, New York, well, DePauli, he noticed a woman who was being accosted. He quickly realized that Deborah Henry was being stabbed. So you know what? This 53-year-old man, he stopped his car. He grabbed a softball bat out of his vehicle. And without regard to his own safety, well, DePauli, he got right between them. He intervened to save the woman. Wielding the bat, he ran toward the assailant. That's according to the news report. You see, DePauli, he stepped between him and Henry, who had already been stabbed, and he forced the assailant about 10 feet away. Well, police officers were called, and eventually they subdued the attacker while that victim was taken to the hospital. And fortunately, this young lady by the name of Deborah Henry, she was able to recover from serious stab wounds. She was able to do that because Chris DePauli had enough courage to step in and save her life. So here is a 53-year-old man with a bat, a good man with a bat, who stopped a bad man with a knife, a bad man who was stabbing a young lady. And Christopher's courage, his courage, saved this young lady's life. And this, my friend, is our Charlie Crimebuster's courageous citizen of the week. Now back to our focus story. These three men that were responsible for the death of Arbery were as follows. The first guy is a guy by the name of Gregory McMichael. He was born on December the 23rd, 1955. He was 64 at the time of the incident. He had previously worked as a police officer. That was from 1982 to 1989. And he was also an investigator for the Brunswick District Attorney's Office. That was from 1995 to his retirement in May of 2019. Now, in 2018, McMichael had helped in an investigation in the DA's office. And interesting enough, it was about Arbery, his shoplifting charge, which also led to revoking and extending his probation. Now, it is unknown whether McMichael that day particularly remembered that when he encountered Arbery on the day of the shooting. In fact, there was no mention at all of McMichael's previous affiliation with Arbery in the Glenn County Police report of that day. The prosecution later did say that Arbery's charges, well, it really had nothing to do with his murder that day. The second man was his son, Travis McDonald. He was born January the 18th, 1986. He was 34 years of age at the incident. And his son was a former U.S. Coast Guard mechanic. That was between 2007 and 2016. And he did have some training in law enforcement. His training was in the Coast Guard regarding enforcing Coast Guard rules, regulations, as well as laws. There was a third man. He was the neighbor. His name was William Roddy Bryan. He was born on August the 19th, 1969. He was 50 years of age at the incident, and he was a neighbor of the McMichaels when he saw them chasing young Arbery. And he made the worst decision of his life when he got into his pickup and attempted to help them by blocking the pathway of escape for Arbery. You see, while these three men may have thought they were doing right and were protecting their neighborhood, they had no real evidence, had no probable cause to stop this man, no evidence that he was guilty of anything. You see, while he may have entered the house under construction without permission, and there were plenty of others that did so, my friend, that was not enough probable cause for anybody to apprehend him at gunpoint. And it was no reason for him to be chased down by these three men. And the jury, they agreed, and they found these three men guilty of the murder of Ahmaud Arbery. But what was the tipping point? What was the tipping point for the jury that day? Because, they had argued that it was self-defense. They argued that this young black man had tried to take the gun away from McMichael that day, that he had his hands on the gun. And if it was he said, she said, well, it might have ended differently. However, the third man, Mr. Bryan, he had a video. He took a video with his phone, and in that video, we all saw how it helped the jury find that they were guilty. Because in the video, it was very apparent that this young man was being chased down by armed men, that he was literally running for his life. So you see, videos today, my friend, they're making the difference in how juries are seeing things. We saw how it helped the jury to find Kyle Rittenhouse not guilty and that he acted in self-defense. You see, video today does and will play a vital part in the trials of this century. Police body cams and cell phones, well, they will show juries and help juries be their own eyewitness to accounts of crimes. And the video that was requested by juries in both the Rittenhouse and the Arbery case, even while they were deliberating, no doubt, viewing those videos was the tipping point in both of these juries. Now, in a moment, we're going to take a look at the judge who pronounced the sentencing in this case this past Friday. But now it's time for what we call our crazy crook story, something to lighten the load in these dark crime days. Now, they say that criminals always return to the scene of the crime, but a bumbling California bank robber, well, he didn't even wait a day before. Not even a day before he came back to the branch that he had already robbed. Samuel Brown, 33 years of age, well, he was busted after he tried to rob the same Fountain Valley Chase Bank 2 days in a row. You see, the San Diego resident, he took off with a large amount of cash after he slipped a stick-up note to a teller at the New Hope Street Chase Bank at 3 p.m. on Monday. That was a Fountain City Police report. But I guess the dough wasn't enough for Brown, because guess what? He came back to the bank the next morning, tried to rob it again. But the police, they were on to him. They arrived, arrested him without incident. That's according to the release. You see, Brown, surprise, surprise, had an outstanding arrest warrant and a rap sheet that included previous robbery convictions in San Diego. And now he's being held at a $170,000 bail in Orange County Jail. And he's facing multiple robbery charges. And that, my friend, is Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Crook of the Week. Now we're going to talk about the judge that sentenced these men of killing Ahmaud Arbery in South Georgia. He actually sentenced them to life in prison. 2 of them, life in prison without parole. The judge is Timothy R. Wamsley. And interesting enough, during his sentencing, he held a minute of silence Friday, saying that he hoped to show that the time that the 25-year-old spent being chased by the defendants. You see, that 1 minute, according to him, represents a fraction of the time that Ahmaud Arbery was running in Statilla Shores. That's what Walmsley said before going silent. Now, the pursuit of Arbery occurred for about 5 minutes. The judge said that once he resumed speaking. And then he said that as father and son, Gregory and Travis McMichael, and their neighbor, William Roddy Bryan Jr., chased the 25-year-old black man in their neighborhood outside of Brunswick, Georgia. Walmsley, he called Arbery's killing callous, said it occurred because confrontation was being sought. Walmsley went on to say that Arbery, he left his home to go for a run and ended up running for his life. Now, the sentences, they're in line with a request from the prosecutor that day, who recommended that Bryan, 52, get a chance at parole, but that the McMichaels be denied that possibility. She said the father and son showed no remorse or empathy for the trapped and terrified Ahmaud Arbery. She said there were so many opportunities to stop, to think. And here's the real problem, she went on to say. Greg McMichael, he was a former law enforcement. Travis McMichael had served in the Coast Guard. So here we have some men who should have known better. That's what the prosecutor told the judge Friday morning. And Judge Walmsley, he agreed with the prosecutor, and he sentenced both father and son to life in prison without parole, while giving Bryan the possibility of parole. So in our Charlie Chat today, I wanted to allow the judge himself to give us words for reflection. And here is exactly what the judge said just prior to sentencing this past Friday.
It's seen differently by all depending on their perspective and the prism of your lives. Instead of closure, maybe we'd best see today's proceeding as an exercise in accountability. We are all accountable for our own actions. Sometimes, in today's day and age, that statement is lost upon many. And today, the defendants are being held accountable for their actions here in Superior Court. Today demonstrates that everybody is accountable to the rule of law. Taking the law into your own hands is a dangerous endeavor. I'm not sure how this comes across. I'll say it anyway. I think ultimately, with regard to the murder of Ahmaud Arbery, it holds us all accountable. I read somewhere, and I don't remember where it was, that at a minimum, Ahmaud Arbery's death should force us to consider expanding our definition of what a neighbor may be and how we treat them. I argue that maybe a neighbor is more than the people who just own property around your house. I also believe that in assuming the worst in others, we show our worst character. Assuming the best in others is always the best course of action. And maybe those are the grand lessons from this case. I will let others spend as much time as they want writing about it and talking about it. But those are my general thoughts with regard to this case and sentencing.
Well, there you have it. There's a judge saying some really important words. Those are very good words for all of us to live by. Thank you, Judge, for giving us those thoughts. In closing, let me say a couple of other things. Number one, we need to be more certain of our actions. We need not to just listen to fake news telling us this and telling us that, but we need to find the facts as they are before we act. If you do carry a weapon and you're a concealed carrier permit holder, please realize, my friend, that you have great responsibility. You need to make sure that you never use it unless it's absolutely necessary. And it's best to leave law enforcement up to those that are trained, the professionals who know how to deal with these types of situations. While I totally believe in the right to defend yourself, I do not believe that we ought to go around just because we're carrying a weapon and take on roles that are not necessarily our roles to take on. So until this time next time, this is Charlie Crimebuster reminding you, be safe, Be alert. For the life you save, my friend, it may be your very own.